tree, to not be able to graze.
Echo. Yeah, so click on that screen,
Yeah,
that screen you want to share.
You're sharing now.
How's that?
Bingo. Well, we're seeing all your pictures now. We're
That's-
not just seeing one picture.
And
Oh,
very small.
Oh, because I just had clicked on the one to make it big.
Sylvia, Nicola, Jerlyn, John, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I wish we were in a room where we could meet and chat beforehand, but this is the best we can do. And I'm so happy for everybody's commitment to this. Thank you. And I don't think I can hear anything you're saying, by the way Morgan has it set up. But again, thanks so much. And I hope we can all do this in person again. Thanks, Morgan. Welcome, everyone, to Face with the people of Palestine. We are so excited, especially with this weather, that you could join us for this event. Both those who braved the storm to be at the Church of the Redeemer, and those of you who've joined us for our YouTube live stream from as far away as New York, Connecticut, Kitchener. First, some housekeeping. For those of you here who may be unfamiliar with the building, there are 2 gender-neutral washrooms near the rear to your right. If they are occupied, and if your needs can handle it, there are 2 more up the stairs across from those washrooms. In the unlikely event of an emergency, like my microphone leaps into flames, you can exit via the Bloor Street doors where you came in, or you can exit at either of the doors to my left or right. I feel like a stewardess now. That's about it for housekeeping. Let me give you some context here. I was on a Friends of the Holy Land Zoom call in late 2023 and heard Father Fadi Diab say, "We are broken by the bombs, and we are broken by the silence of the churches." The Reverend Munther Ishak, the other guest on the call, lamented that the West did not see Palestinians. Hearing that broke my heart. How do we see and hear those who are broken and feel unseen, especially when they're so far away? Over the past 2 years, the information made available to us in newspapers and broadcasts about Palestine, Israel, and Gaza has been at best insufficient and lacked context. At worst, it has been highly biased. Social media information has been polarized, reducing everything to simple black and white binaries, lost in the rhetoric, in the statistics of death and injury, and in arguments about international law are the actual stories and experiences of real people. We have then a remarkable opportunity this afternoon. We have with us live and on Zoom 6 women and men who have spent time in Palestine and Israel. One lived there for several years and is aware of the complexity of the political situation. 5 visited in December 2025, spending time with children, churches, farmers, and theologians. They visited holy sites and places of support and healing. They listened to people's stories. They saw bullet holes in a school wall and experienced the resiliency of a church community in Ramallah. They have spoken with women widowed through violence and seen Muslims, Israelis, and Christians cooperate in peacemaking and nonviolent resistance. Their stories will take us behind the scenes and place us in proximity to a reality we would otherwise be unable to know. Each of our pilgrims returned changed, knowing they had to give voice to what they have seen and heard. For those of you who are curious, I hope this afternoon helps to deepen your understanding. For those who are activists, perhaps these stories will be able to renew hope and offer inspiration for peacemaking. For contemplatives who have been unable to find words for prayer, may these stories nourish your praxis. For all of us, this is a challenge to go deeper, to be better informed, to get closer, and to do more for peace in Palestine, Israel, and Gaza. It's my pleasure to introduce our 5 panelists and our moderator. Dr. Sylvia Kiesmat is a member of the Church of the Redeemer. She is a biblical scholar and environmental activist who teaches online courses that are open to all at Bible Remixed. Sylvia lives on an off-grid, solar-powered permaculture farm. The Reverend Jerlynn Henry is the incumbent at the Church of Holy Wisdom, the youngest parish in the Diocese of Toronto. She has a growing online presence, platforms she uses to draw connections and invite conversation around faith, world, and life of Anglican clergy. And I'll just say here as an aside that one of the pilgrims told me that they were in a Bedouin house in the middle of nowhere, and Jerlynn was recognized because of her online presence. Dr. Jeff Nowers is a parish priest based at Church of Christ the King in Etobicoke. He holds a PhD in theology from St. Michael's College of the University of Toronto. He teaches in the Faculty of Divinity of Trinity College, and he is active in various Palestinian solidarity movements, including Canadian Friends of Sabeel. The Reverend Nicholas Skinner is the incumbent of Grace Church Markham and has served as a parish priest in the Diocese of Toronto for 25 years. Social justice has always been a core component of her ministry. Her first visit to the Holy Land was in 2023 when she finally witnessed the reality of life for Palestinians. Nicola, for now, is an empty nester. You know they always come back. With her husband Tim and half-Great Dane, Lou. When not working, she's making soap, reading, painting, or crafting. And on a personal note, I'll just say Nicola officiated at Tanya's and my wedding, and it's good to have her here. The Reverend Canon Chris Brittain is the Dean of Divinity and Margaret E. Fleck Chair in Anglican Studies at Trinity College in the University of Toronto. He teaches in the areas of political theology, ethics, Anglican studies, and disaster studies. In the early 2000s, he served as a deacon at the Church of the Redeemer and was very involved in what has grown into the Common Table. This was his second trip to Israel, Palestine. For those of you online who didn't hear Chris preach this morning, his sermon will be up on our YouTube channel, Must Listen. Our moderator, Jon Allen, was a Canadian ambassador to Israel from 2006 to 2010. He holds a degree in international law from the University of London School of Economics. Jon is currently a fellow at the Monk School of Global Affairs at the University of Toronto. He is active in the Rozana Project, an international organization that fosters relationships between healthcare professionals and communities in Israel and Palestine. You'll have an opportunity later this afternoon to donate to Rozana. Jon will tell you more about that. Jon is going to interact with our panelists, keeping things on track. You know, they're all preachers. And once the storytelling and reflection component is completed, assist in getting your questions to the panel. Jon, Nicola, Sylvia, and Jerlyn are all joining us online. Chris and Jeff are in the building. And gentlemen, you can take your seats there now, I think. Jon, thank you.
Thanks very much. It's an honor. We've got a little echo. How's that? Better now? It's a great honor for me to be moderating this panel, and thank you for asking me to. Given the events that are currently taking place in the West Bank, including increased and unrestricted settler violence, de facto annexation of the territory, and not only indifference by the IDF and the Israeli police in many occasions, but actual facilitation of the activities by two messianic ministers in the Netanyahu government. Given all this conversation, I think, is particularly important and timely. I have been asked to put to each of the panelists, each of the clergy, to do two things for us. First of all, to please describe the most significant takeaway from your visit. What moved you? What surprised you? What inspired you to act? And then secondly, to tell us what you are doing or what you're thinking about doing now that you've returned to Canada to try and respond to what you saw and to contribute to a vision for justice and peace in Israel and Palestine. I know it's a lot, and we've really got about 9 minutes for each of you. I know telling clergy, men and women, not to speak too long is a challenge, as it is for diplomats. But if we can try and stick to about 9 minutes, then we'll have an opportunity for the congregation to ask you questions, which is often the most interesting part of these events. So who are we starting with? Oh, Nicola. Mm-hmm. Okay, wonderful. So Nicola, I've asked you the questions. If you can try and answer them for us, that would be great.
Thank you, Jon. So I'd like to share with you the takeaways that I had from the day that we did the Sabile Way of the Cross. And I just would like to, if I can, show you this beautiful booklet that we were given. It is a 14-station Way of the Cross, and it's able to be taken as a PDF so that you can use it yourself, and I really recommend it. I'd like to read you what's on the back of the book. It says, the cover and the back of this book are intentionally reversed. The empty tomb on the back reminds us that the way of the cross is resurrection. Palestinians are currently living in a time of Sorrowful Friday, the Arabic name for Good Friday, a time of suffering and oppression. Nevertheless, Sabile seeks to emphasize hope. The cross is the current reality, but it is not the end. We set our eyes on the resurrection. We shall overcome. So I begin with those words of hope for you. And on this day, Omar, who was the leader of our group, Omar from Sabile, we were driven around East Jerusalem and into the West Bank, and we stopped and we read some of the ways of the cross, the stations, and we prayed together at various points. We didn't actually manage to do as many as we hoped due to one interaction that we had with a yeshiva student. But I'll tell you a little bit about that. But we looked at some of the different stations: refugees, settlements, home demolitions, checkpoints, child prisoners, water, the walls, the loss of Jerusalem, and hope in the absence of hope. So let me just share with you a few highlights for me of that day. We went to the Mount of Olives and we looked out over the city, and I just see if I can share this picture with you. So I will try and bring up the pictures, and if somebody could just give me a thumbs up if you're seeing the picture. So it's an iconic view over the, you're not seeing the picture. Okay, I'm just going to do this without pictures. Okay. So we drove to the Temple on the Mount, and we prayed there, and we looked out over the city. And as we're looking to our left, there is a community there, and we were told that the community there has been slated for demolition. And that Palestinian community has been given demolition orders. And the reality is this: once given demolition orders, they have to pay the government a fee. And the fee, we were told, is roughly between $1,000 and $1,500 per month to have their own home demolished. They also have to pay for the demolition of their home. They also have to pay the soldiers food, for the soldiers' refreshments and food whilst their house is being demolished. There is no recompense for the demolition of their home. That is the reality that people are facing all over the West Bank. And we looked at that first as we looked over the old city of Jerusalem. And the reason for the demolition is archaeological purposes. And so Israel at any point can reclaim places of Palestinian land and homes and say they must be demolished and you have to pay the price for it. We visited a site. We then drove to a village, and I've forgotten the name of the village, but we went to look at a village that had been Christian, and everybody has been driven out of the village. It is now unoccupied. But when we were at the top of the hill and we were saying the station together, we were approached by a Jewish Orthodox gentleman. And he asked us who we were and what we were doing, and he was quite friendly. And it was good at first for us to begin to have what we thought would be a conversation with him. But it turned out to not be really a conversation. And we were very perplexed by the end of a very long monologue about his theology. Because he really seemed to suggest that absolutely everything that happens is God's will and there is nothing that we could do about it. So we pressed him on the Holocaust, for instance. He said, God's will. October the 7th, God's will. The oppression of Palestinians, God's will. And he was also American, have to say, so I guess a settler. But he was coming to the houses there, one of the houses, to go to yeshiva there. And I really can't get my head around his theology. It was, he had no kind of conception as a God of justice, or God of a God who cares for the oppressed and the marginalized. And he actually said to us that he felt the safest that he'd ever felt since October 11, that Jerusalem and all of Israel was the safest place to be. Like I say, I'm still kind of in shock at the interaction, but I want to say to you that Omar, who led our group, was so incredibly gracious. He gave his business card to the gentleman and he said, "I'd like to talk to you more. Would you like to do that?" And the gentleman agreed. And when we walked away feeling astounded, Omar said to us, he was one, but we were many. And all the way through the trip, I cannot tell you how astounded I was by the graciousness of the Palestinian Christians that we were accompanied by. Now, we moved on to cross into Shufat, which is where the prophet Jeremiah is from. And we parked the car and we looked at the two communities on either sides of the wall. On the one side are the settlements, which are clean and shiny, and they have fresh running water and electricity and everything that you could possibly want. We walked through the walls, which are very, very oppressive. It is really like a land of cages and walls. There's nothing open and free about it the way there is here in Canada. And we looked at the two sides of the road, and that was when Omar really first pointed out to us the situation with water, because all of the high-rise buildings on the Palestinian side are covered in water containers, because they have to pay 4 times the amount for water from the government. 4 times more than the Israelis pay for the government. Sometimes they only receive their water every 50 days. And so people have to be very, very stringent and very careful about how they use water. But on the Israeli side, water is freely available. We heard a story as well that shocked us about garbage, because some of the Israeli settlers are dumping their garbage into the Palestinian communities. And this is causing a real problem for infestation and illness and rats. And in the Knesset, the Israeli government had a conversation about using F-16 bombers on the Palestinians, because the Palestinians have no way to deal with the garbage situation. And so they have been having to burn it. And the settlements are not happy about the smoke from the burning garbage going into their settlements, even though the garbage is theirs. And the Knesset was speaking of bombing the Palestinians. That was very, very difficult. But as I say, going through the walls as well, there is this sense of incredible oppression. There are 980 checkpoints in the West Bank. So I've got 1 minute, so I'm going to be really, really quick. When we went into Shufat, Omar showed us a boys' school, which is from a UN boys' school, which is behind high walls and fences. And sometimes children throw rocks. When the children throw rocks, the IDF will come in and they will shoot up the girls' school, because the girls' school is very close to the road. And so we witnessed a girls' school which is covered in bullet holes and broken windows. Children are arrested, they are arbitrarily detained, they are physically abused, sexually abused. It is absolutely horrific that parents are having to warn their children about the dangers of trying to stand up and resist. And so that was very, very tragic to witness that, and to realize the fear that children have to live with and that everybody has to live with on a daily basis. And finally, I'd like to tell you that we stood outside for the final station, and we prayed outside Ofa Prison Detention Center, which houses not only adults, but many, many, many children. There are, I think it's 9,000 that are in there. And we prayed outside, and we sang, "Jesus, remember me when we come into your kingdom," with tears in our eyes at the absolute injustice of what goes on inside those walls. And I think I'll just leave you with the final question, which Omar shared with us, was why must Palestinians continue to be victims of victims? We saw a land where two groups of traumatized people are living in the same place and trauma is perpetuated. And we know from our First Nations and residential school situation here that it takes about 7 generations to heal. And so the road ahead to peace and justice, it's possible, but it is a very, very long road. And where did I see some hope? Well, I saw hope in the painted walls where people have painted beautiful murals on the wall on the Palestinian side. And thank God for hope, because it is really the most powerful tool that we have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nicola. And let me now turn to Geraldine, if I may.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. And Morgan, thanks for sharing the slides. So I got a tattoo in the oldest tattoo shop in the world, established in 1300. It's called the Jerusalem Cross. And 4 of us on this panel, led by our very own Nicola here, have this very same tattoo, all from the same shop, Razuk. The Jerusalem Cross has a lot of connotations, but my favorite one is that it represents the wounds of Christ. Most altars in our churches bear the same number of crosses that this tattoo bears, 5. It represents the wounds of Jesus's body, his arms, his legs, his side, body beaten and broken, gift of God for the people of God. I see the tattoo whenever I lift my hands to consecrate the Eucharist, and I remember Jesus, and I remember Palestine, and I remember Palestinian Christians. On our solidarity pilgrimage, we went to a city called Taibe. Next slide, please. It is the last fully Christian village in the occupied West Bank. Taibe means the goodly. Taibe is completely surrounded by illegal Israeli settlements that the city now has nowhere to grow. So it is and will always be, while under occupation, 18.6 square kilometers. On June of last year, 2025, Taibe was attacked by dozens of settlers who set fire to homes and vehicles. Next slide, please. The day before we were there, Father Bashar Fadwe, the local Catholic priest that we met, told us that he visited a family just that morning whose car had been set on fire. Settlers also damage olive trees. They prevent access to land for agriculture, and they sometimes even set fire to the fields. Settler violence in Taibe seems to have multiple priorities, but 2 of them really stood out to me. One was to remind Palestinians that they are indeed at the mercy of the occupation. And 2, to just wear Palestinians down, to make their lives so hard and so long that they just want to leave. More than 60% of the families in Taibe have left. Houses remain empty, the streets were somewhat bare, and the grief is palpable. Father Bashar said that sometimes he actually tries to convince the people, the remaining Christians, not to leave. As an Anglican priest in Toronto, I rarely have to convince my parish of anything. But though Taibe, the last fully Christian village in the West Bank, is under threat, why I chose to talk about this was the micro resilience that caught me off guard multiple times. There's this parish called St. George. Next slide, please. It was built in the 5th century in the Byzantine era, and it too was a victim of arson last year. The broken walls of the parish stand on a hill 1,500 years old. And right next to this parish, next slide, please, was a Christmas tree with big golden balls on it, evergreen. And as we walked around the parish, a woman from the altar guild came and tended to the space as if it wasn't falling apart, as if it wasn't recovering from a fire. Just like the faithful women of our altar guilds, she was tenderly and defiantly refilling the oils in the lamps. And I guess this is what they meant when they said, we fight fire with fire. Munter Isaac, on his Christmas sermon, he said, Christmas is the proclamation of a God who confronts the logic of empire. In other words, right, that Christmas tree that stands in this historic place calls out to settlers and says, your occupation doesn't make sense. Your arson doesn't make sense. It only fuels the fire of resilience. As we walked down Taibe, I asked why so many of the houses were empty. Like, why didn't you just move in, like grow your own property? And the leader of the day said to us, Palestinians don't do that. Everyone knows whose house that is, and we just hold it for them. The powers of the occupation, I guess, don't tempt Palestinians in the same way. At the end of the day, in Taipei, we went to Taipei Brewing Company. Next slide, please. And we met Madis, who is the first and only female brewer in the Middle East. And this family business started in 1982. And in 2019, they finally entered the LCBO market until LCBO said, we can't sell your beer anymore because Canada at the time didn't believe in the state of Palestine. And so made in Palestine didn't make sense to them after they received some pushback from lobbyists. And so since 2019, we can buy beer for $4.10, but we can't buy beer in Canada, the Taipei beer in Canada, $4.10. The resilience, though, that in this brewery that really caught me off guard was that in the midst of the genocide happening in Gaza, next slide, please, tourism sank in the West Bank, just like toppled down. And people didn't know when they would go back to any resemblance of life. And this brewery, they used to hold an Oktoberfest every single year. But then since the war broke out, they've completely had to stop. But in the midst of that complete stoppage, Taipei Brewery expanded instead of shutting down. So that all of the brewing tanks behind the two of us there grew in the midst of the violence in Gaza. And so it was so resilient. Instead of pausing production, they expanded it. The people of Taipei could see past this moment of occupation to the potential of resurrection, which I found so uniquely Christian, right? This hopeful expectation that empires will fall and that there is in-death resurrection, and a promise that the people of Taipei live and breathe constantly. 1 minute. Okay, next slide, please. You're right, Jon. We are indeed pastors. We got to see the Archbishop, Reverend Hassam Nusum, and what really struck me was that he himself is the only person serving as bishop for not only Palestine and Israel, but a number of countries in the Middle East. And he spoke with so much resilience. And in the parish of St. Andrew, there was so much life. There was children's voices, familiar liturgy, ordinary faithfulness. And when we had lunch, we were served by 11th graders who were actively preparing for a life of hospitality and hotel management. Sitting there, I was reminded of the familiar paradox of Christianity, that we're pressed down but not erased. Next slide, please. Last one. What am I doing when we come back? So as I was waiting to leave, I was really worried and telling Jeff, Nowers, what are we going to do? And I came up with this idea that I'll tell 15 stories and it'll reach 1 million people. That's the hope. And I started making these videos online, and we're now at video 9, and it's reached about 2.6 million. And I just pointed out that people are yearning to hear the story. And so I'm committed to telling the story on the platforms where people are listening.
Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, Sylvia, you're next. Thank you very much, Geraldine.
We're telling these stories because the stories we tell ourselves about who we are, where we are, and who our enemies and friends are shape who we become. They shape our actions. And so on the 5th day of our trip to Israel, Palestine, we went to Bethlehem. Only 5 kilometers from Jerusalem, for many Palestinians, Bethlehem might as well be 500 kilometers away, for it's almost impossible to get permission to visit Jerusalem from Bethlehem. Palestinians who live in Bethlehem and work in Jerusalem need to plan on 2 hours to travel to work in the morning, 2 hours for 5 kilometers, and the same to come home again when the checkpoints are open. Often they're arbitrarily closed, which means it's impossible to get to work, or it will take much longer. It's also difficult to get permission to go into Jerusalem for medical care. A gravely ill person might get permission to go to the hospital or see a doctor, but on the day itself, The delays might be too long or the checkpoint closed, and it's impossible to make the appointment. 5 kilometers, yet almost inaccessible. Our first stop in Bethlehem was to meet Dr. Mitri Rahab, who is the president and founder of Dar al-Kalima University and a Lutheran pastor. Dr. Rahab talked about sharing with us the realities of Christians in Gaza and the West Bank. Jerlyn has already talked about the West Bank, but he talked to us more about Gaza. We are seeing, Dr. Rahab said, the last chapter of Christianity in Gaza. Gaza was the location of the first Christian monastery, the first Christian church, the first Christian school, and by the end of this decade, Dr. Rahab said, there will be no Christians in Gaza. And the situation is not much better in the West Bank. Now, what I want to focus on here, which we talked about with Dr. Rahab, was the role that Christian theology has played in this increasingly violent situation. Because the Bible has become a dangerous book, justifying the narrative of genocide towards Palestinians. On the one hand, there is what is called the Joshua factor, the reading of the book of Joshua as literal history, and the use of the texts of genocide in Joshua to justify what's happening today. So, Benjamin Netanyahu, in his press conference on October 27th, 2023, could refer to the Bible to declaring the invasion of Israeli troops into Gaza. He said, "You must remember what Amalek has done to you," says our Holy Bible. And he's referring to 1 Samuel 15:3. "Now go and smite Amalek and utterly destroy all that they have, and spare them not, but slay both man and woman, infant and suckling, ox and sheep, camel and ass." Now, here's the thing. It's not just Jewish interpretations of the text that make this violence possible. There's also a very powerful Christian Zionist movement it's largest in the United States, that uses these same arguments to justify violence against Palestinians. And Dr. Rahab describes it in this way. The settler colonial project is enabled and maintained by hardware and software. By the hardware of military weapons that flow into the Israeli state from the West, and by the software of a biblical narrative where this land belongs to those who are Jewish and Palestinians need to be eradicated. So what do we do in the face of this kind of a narrative? Well, Dr. Rahab founded Dar al-Kalima, a university of art, culture, and design in Bethlehem. He says it's been apparent that political tools have not worked to curb the violence and injustice that Palestinians face daily, and it's become clear that religious tools have not worked either. So how does fresh air come into the situation? Well, the arts are places where Muslims and Christians and Jews can work together to develop new tools to tell the Palestinian story. So Dar al-Kalima University is helping to shape the imagination of a generation of Palestinians, but also helping to shape the imagination of the world in relation to what's happening in Gaza and the West Bank, especially through writing and award-winning films. For instance, the film The Present, about the struggle of a father and daughter to buy a present for someone, it was a struggle, won a BAFTA. Or the film Vibrations from Gaza, about how deaf children experience the war in Gaza, which has won 18 awards. And of course, No Other Land, a documentary made through a partnership between a Palestinian and a Jewish Israeli that won an Oscar. And there's also Lilies from Gaza, Women Artists in Times of War, which in the middle of war, women who've lost everything are still telling their stories through art. And we saw the display, we saw the art pieces that are in this book at Dar al-Kalima University. And unfortunately, I can't share those slides with you online. So one thing the churches could be doing is amplifying these voices, the voices of those going through this violence, through these films, through these books. So shaping imagination as an act of resistance is at the heart of Dar al-Kalima's university's vision. And I want to speak briefly about one other institution in Bethlehem that's also engaged in creative resistance. So let me back up a moment. As we drove from Bethlehem to Jerusalem to Bethlehem, we saw a lot of rubble. Some of it was in Jerusalem itself, where a Palestinian business had been demolished in the last couple of days. But much of it was by the side of the road, as the state of Israel engages in widening the roads that Israelis are permitted to drive on. They don't do much on the Palestinian roads. And when this happens, Palestinian land with olive trees and gardens is bulldozed and destroyed. It is, as the making of roads has always been since Roman times, an environmental disaster. This is part of the ecocide that accompanies genocide. When Israel took over Palestinian villages in 1948 and 67, they uprooted all the trees around them. Domestic trees like apricots, fig, and olive, the wild trees like hawthorn, oak, and carob. And they replaced them with pine trees and other European species that reminded them of their European homes. And of course, this was disastrous for biodiversity, right? The insects and animals that relied on those native trees did not have homes any longer. Israel has also diverted the Jordan River water from Lake Tiberias, Lake of Galilee, some of you might know it, out of the Jordan Basin, so that the Jordan River is now a small stream. If tourists want to see where Jesus was baptized, they've made an artificial pool for that. Jesus could not be baptized in the Jordan today. Wetlands are systematically drained, so that hundreds of species have disappeared from what was one of the most biodiverse areas on the earth. And of course, Israel is methodically destroying all the trees in Gaza. More than 11 Hiroshima-type bombs have fallen on the tiny area of Gaza during the genocide, and they have destroyed the land. So in the face of that kind of ecocide, ecological ecological destruction, Dr. Mazin Kumsaya has begun the Institute for Palestinian Biodiversity. He runs a botanic garden and a natural history museum and is involved with reforesting the West Bank with native species using permaculture principles. And of course, this is challenging, for Israel regularly bulldozes new plantings and gardens. And yet the Institute for Biodiversity persists in planting seeds and trees, in planting hope. So how have these stories shaped my own commitments in the face of injustice in Palestine? Well, first of all, I'm a biblical scholar and a preacher and a teacher. So I have recommitted to learning from Palestinian liberation theologians and artists about how to read and teach and preach the Bible in ways that give life rather than death, that create a community of peace and justice rather than a community of violence. So that is shaping my writing, my preaching that some of you have heard at Church of the Redeemer, and especially my teaching at Bible Remixed. And secondly, as a permaculture farmer, I'm exploring how to raise the profile of the loss of biodiversity in Palestine in the permaculture community. Palestinians are looking for volunteers to come, not only in solidarity and witness, but also to plant and tend, imagine and create. I would love to go myself, but am exploring how to amplify that need as well. And I'm committed to telling these stories, because the stories we tell about Palestine and Israel are the stories that could perhaps help to bring healing.
Let's hope so. Let's definitely all hope so and pray for it. Let me now, if I can, turn to Jeff, who as obviously was able to fight the storm and is live at the church. Please, Jeff.
Everybody. On day 8 of our Solidarity pilgrimage, we visited a crime scene. We were driven to the South Hebron Hills, to a Bedouin village called El Khair. Population is probably no more than 300. And in my view, as we entered this area, very semi-desert region, I think it's one of the most beautiful areas of Palestine. However, the land is marred by the very visible effects of an illegal occupation. I'm going to ask Morgan to put up a map. There it is. After the Oslo Accords were signed in 1995, the West Bank was carved up into 3 fragmented areas. Area A is under Palestinian control. So Area A is the darker areas on the map. Area B is under both Palestinian and Israeli control. That's the kind of the yellow areas. And then Area C, which is the white, is under exclusive Israeli control. These 3 areas were intended, when the Oslo Accords were signed, these 3 areas were intended to mark a 3-stage withdrawal. Israel would first withdraw from Area A, followed by Area B, and finally Area C, all in order to negotiate a bona fide 2-state solution. 30 years later, at the present moment, this gradual withdrawal hasn't happened. Indeed, Israel has brazenly gone in the opposite direction, building settlements that strategically threaten Palestinian communities in all areas, A, B, and C. el-Khair is situated in Area C, way down, way down at the south, just a little bit southeast of Hebron. And because it's in Area C, it is subject to military rule. Surrounding this village, is the expanding settlement of Carmel, one of many, many initiatives of Israel to consolidate its occupation. An occupation, it must be stated, that stands in flagrant violation of international law. Let me quote from Article 49 of the Fourth Geneva Convention. Quote, "The occupying power shall not deport or transfer parts of its own civilian population into the territory it occupies." End of quote. el-Khair is an active crime scene, encompassed by the illegality of occupation and glaring settler colonialism. We arrived at el-Khair via a road that cuts straight through the village, leading to a huge iron gate permitting access only to settlers of Carmel. Differences between el-Khair and Carmel could not be starker. Inside the gate, settlement homes have all the modern amenities: HVAC, internet, reliable utilities, especially water. Outside the gate, the people of el-Khair must operate without access to the electrical grid. Water is always on short supply and rationed. In fact, as Nicola mentioned, throughout the West Bank, Palestinians face water shortages. Every building has large water storage tanks on the roof, and that's because Israel controls all the water from the river to the sea, keeping 85% and then selling the remaining 15% at a premium to Palestinians. Children of Carmel have easy access to their own schools, while the children of el-Khair are forced on certain days to remain home because settlers may have blocked access to the road leading to the school. This is exactly what happened when we visited. Kids were prevented from going to school because a settler was out walking along the path, preventing the kids from getting to school. While these apartheid conditions are undeniable, what's happening at el-Khair goes beyond apartheid. Carmel is expanding directly into el-Khair, with Palestinians living in fear of demolition notices. This expansion is a tactic of what Norman Finkelstein has called liquidation That is to say, render living conditions so intolerable that Palestinians will leave. But rather than roll over and lose their homes, many Palestinians have resisted this illegal expansion and takeover. A key person in this resistance was Ada Hathaleen. He achieved recognition for his involvement with the Oscar-winning 2024 documentary, No Other Land. On July 28th, 6 months ago, just last year, while Ada, with a video camera in hand, joined some activists to block the bulldozing of a Palestinian property, he was shot dead by a settler named Yenon Levi. Ada died at the scene holding his 1-year-old son. Yenon Levi was arrested, but then released under house arrest after the court ruled he acted in self-defense. I want to show a video, very short video, of Ada speaking, obviously before he died, and I think what he has to say is rather profound.
Here it's an oppression. It's really an oppression. You should not give up. The results will take years and years and years. So you should be patient. And one time I said, if you want to live here in Khair, you have to have two things. First of all, you have to be patient. The second thing, you have to have hope. You cannot live without hope. So without these two things, you cannot live here. We, the people here, we are not against anyone. We are not against colors or nationalities or religions. No, we look to the people as humans, and we want the same from them. We want them also like to look to us as the same.
Our delegation had a lengthy meeting with Ada's older brother, Khalil Hathaleen, who showed us the crime scene where his brother was killed. Khalil runs a small community center that serves the al-Khair residents. He told us that international visitors are always welcome for extended visits to al-Khair. Their presence helps to deter the constant threat of settler attacks. The women of our delegation were able to visit Ada's wife, Hannity, now a widow, raising 3 small children. I wasn't in the room, but I know that that meeting was very emotionally raw. What is to be done? I am haunted by that question all the time. My first impulse was to find a way to stay at Khair, to remain with the people. And I do intend to return at some point. But what can we do where we live here in the West? Well, first, we need to avail ourselves of every opportunity to make a solidarity pilgrimage to Palestine. We need to visit the land, meet with Palestinians engaged in struggle, bear witness, listen, and learn, so that we are able to be more effective ambassadors of Palestinian liberation here at home. Second, we must support organizations in Palestine that are working toward Palestinian liberation. The Khair Community Center, the work of Isa Amro in Hebron, the WIAM Conflict Resolution Center in Bethlehem, the Tent of Nations Educational and Ecological Farm, the Sabeel Liberation Theology Center. These are a few examples. Individuals like Hannity Hathaleen also need our financial support. Third, we must connect with local movements on the ground engaged in Palestinian solidarity work. East End Acts, Toronto for Palestine with chapters in Spadina, Fort York, and Toronto Centre. Christians for a Free Palestine. Independent Jewish Voices. Again, these are just some local examples. It's important to connect with others, to join the movement for liberation. We can't act effectively as siloed individuals. Fourth, we must adopt a BDS stance: boycotts, divestments, sanctions, with respect to the state of Israel. Why? Because Israel is operating in brazen violation of international law, with impunity. Israel is doing everything to destroy even the idea of a two-state solution. We must boycott Israeli products, not support Israel with our tourism dollars, pay closer attention to our investment portfolios, and divest from anything that supports Israel. We must also press our federal government to impose economic sanctions on the state of Israel. And fifth, we must confront and refute the ideology of Christian Zionism. I'm referring here to ideas and action that ensure a Jewish state from the river to the sea with no space for Palestinian sovereignty. This ideology, often rooted in scriptural proof texts, is a virus that has infected many churches, and the Anglican Church of Canada is not immune to it. So we have our work cut out for us. Let's act. Thank you.
Bravo, and thank you for those calls to action. I think we can all heed them. They're important, and I'll have a couple of words to say about it afterwards. So can I now turn to Chris, who's our last clergyman to speak? Looking forward to your insights, Chris.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for helping making this cold day a little warmer and our dark world a little brighter. I'm going to talk not necessarily about the day or the events that were most shocking or striking, but a day that probably encapsulates where I am now, wrestling with what to do. And so can I see those slides, if you're able to bring them up? This is day 3, which is all in Jerusalem. So no images from the West Bank. And I'm actually going to go backwards through the day. So we're starting at the end of the day and then work to the earlier day. But I hope that illustrates why the end of the day was so impactful. And some of you will have heard me refer to some of this in my sermon today. So can we go to the next slide, please? We visited the Rossing Center for Education and Dialogue in Jerusalem, and we met there with one of their directors, a Jewish woman named Hannah, and I do talk about Hannah in my sermon, but just for those who didn't hear it, the two things that she was clearly very, very torn what's going on in her country, Israel, and in the West Bank and Gaza. This Rossing Center works for reconciliation between peoples in Israel and the West Bank, and for peace between the different religions, the religious groups and ethnic groups. And she said some things to us that expressed how difficult that work is. So one thing she said to us is, no one right now wants to hear about anyone else's pain. Right? So we don't want to hear about the suffering. Israelis don't want to hear about the suffering of Palestinians. Palestinians don't want to hear about the suffering of Israelis. And the other thing, it's so polarized now. Just encapsulate that. I won't go on at length as my sermon does, but the other image here is from the offices of the Rossing Center, and images of these different colored cacti. Right, and we learned elsewhere, particularly in the location Jeff was talking about how cacti are not native to to the West Bank have been brought in often by Palestinians. And but why I use that image, although I don't know for a fact, this is what, actually I did have a brief conversation with Hannah about this. We got interrupted. But as an image for the work of reconciliation in the West Bank, in Israel, it's like, in a very arid, dry place, right? But still resilient and carrying on with that difficult work. I found sort of a profound image to think about. Can we go to the next slide, please? From there, it was sort of, I thought this was a little quirky. It felt more like tourism until we got there, going to visit the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, or in the Eastern tradition, they would prefer that we refer to it as the Church of the Resurrection, which is in the old city of Jerusalem. And one thing, the only thing I want to really highlight is that circled ladder, which you see in a larger image, the immovable ladder. I'd been to this church one other time in the past and visited, and I heard all the same stories in many places. This immovable ladder is a symbol of the fragmented Christian community, right? Because they were fighting, different denominations fighting for control of this sacred church on the site where Jesus is said to have been crucified and buried, right? So Holy Sepulchre. And Roman Catholics and Greek Orthodox and Armenians had fought for centuries over control of this space. And now they have to share it, and they're sort of forced by it. And that ladder sits there since the 18th century because no one can agree to move it. And so it's just, right? So it's Christian division and inaction and paralysis, and that's part of the problem. Until our host, Omar, who this is his parish, said, yes, that's how the story is told by the tour guides. In fact, I found Roman Catholic popes also telling this story. And he says, but that's not the story we tell. He said, yes, for centuries, these different denominations were fighting with each other, trying to control this space, paying bribes to the Ottoman Empire, right? Trying to get a leg up. And in the 18th century, they sat down and said, no more. We are not going to fight with each other. We are not going to pay bribes to the empire. We got to stop this. And so we will share this space. And part of that agreement is we will not change things to try to get a leg up over each other. And that is what the ladder symbolizes. We're going to leave it there because we need to remember the rivalries and the fights, and that reminds us that we must share this space and cooperate. So for them, it's a very different image. Just the power of the story to explain both the history of this region and its symbolism makes so much difference in the story you tell, and that was a constant theme in our visit. Can we go to the next slide, please? This also was intended, I think, by our hosts to be another tourism moment, to go to the Western Wall. But these images are from my first trip in 2023 to the Western Wall. We didn't get there. We didn't get there not because it was too far or something. We went to the gate just outside the entry place to the Western Wall, where it's a security gate. You have to, it's like sort of like going to a Blue Jays game. You have to put your backpack through security and so on, right, doing that. But our host, Omar, was, leading the charge, showing us the way to go. And as soon as he tried to walk in, the security guard said, no, you can't go in. And he started to try to, he shows them his identity card. He's actually a Palestinian Israeli. He's allowed to be in these spaces. But they said no. Said, show us your tourism pass, your tour guide pass. He said, well, I'm not a tour guide, right? And they would not let him in. And they only spoke to him in Hebrew. And he kept saying, I'm sorry, I don't speak Hebrew, right? And the rest of us were sort of standing there, what should we do? And Omar said, well, don't miss this chance to see the West, just go in. And we said, we're not going in without you, right? And the soldier started talking past Omar to us in English, right? Saying, you can go in, just not him. And we said, we're not going in without him. And then he would talk to Omar only in Hebrew. And it was an example of what the life of a Palestinian can be, at the whims of some young, very young soldier, right, who just feels like making the lives of Palestinians inconvenient. And our group, so it was a very vivid, uncomfortable learning moment, right? And again, bless Omar for how he handles such situations with such grace and patience. Can we have the next slide? While we were sort of waiting around, this was dynamic, was going on, I couldn't help but notice all along the walls outside the security areas were all kinds of stickers and posters like this. And I had met with a Jewish friend, a Jewish Israeli, prior to joining my delegation, and she said, "Have you noticed all the images of the kidnapped all over the place?" And I said, "No, not yet." And I started to look for them, and I was imagining great big billboards and posters and everything. That's not what it was. Everywhere in the old city would be these, in little tiny corners on, power boxes, telephone poles, doors, would be these posters. These images of the Israelis who had been kidnapped or killed. Right? And just that ever-present expressions of grief by Israelis. And one of the things we were told while we were there, or it was pointed out to us, is most of those people, 1,200 people killed, on October the 7th, of course, they lived in closer proximity to Gaza. And most of those communities, those kibbutz, those towns, those villages, the inhabitants are among the most supportive of a two-state solution in Israel. They are more left-wing. They don't vote for the Netanyahu regime. And so the victims of October 7th are the most pro-Palestinian demographics in Israel. And one of the dilemmas of the left in Israel now is they have been totally discredited because of, you said there's peace is possible. You said we should look for a two-state solution. Look where that rhetoric got you. And so these symbol not only represents to me the pain of Israelis, but also one of the political dilemmas of contemporary Israel. Can we go to the next slide, please? I include this simply because, again, a potential simply a tourism moment, visiting the Al-Aqsa Mosque or the Dome of the Rock, also a place I had been to in the past. But three things struck me in particular this time. First, we were given a tour by one of the Muslim facilitators or administrators of this, who was incredibly hospitable. More on that in a moment. Two, along this path that you see, just to the right with the trees, when we first arrived, we were there and we were asked to sort of pause and stop before us because our hosts noticed there were some Jewish settlers walking by with their armed escorts, right? And how this was seen as, Jewish Israelis, sort of flaunting their right to be present in all these Palestinian places, accompanied by security guards with big machine guns, and just the ever-present threat. Thirdly, the thing that really impressed me, I had been here before. I had been to the Dome of the Rock, but only outside of the mosques. I'd always been told non-Muslims are not allowed. Our tour guide says, no, that's a lie that people tell. You are welcome. Of course, they want us to, dress appropriately or take off our shoes and so on, and some clothing restrictions for women, but you're allowed to go in. And so I found, my goodness, and the beauty of this place. Can we go to the next slide? Just the beauty of these mosques are really stunning. And so I just was profoundly grateful for the hospitality. But this gets me to the last thing I want to highlight, both in the Dome of the Rock area, but also in these mosques. You might notice, even from the picture, there's no one there. When I was there in 2023, this place was packed with tourists. Now, I don't know about inside the mosque. I didn't go in. But the dome area, the area was just full of people. There's no one there now. Like the old city, compared to 2023, there's no one there, right? People are leaving, tourists aren't coming, and of course, Palestinian businesses, as a result, are dying, right? There's no income coming in. So, illustrated part of the problem. So just to end, then we can go to the last slide. All right, so all these walls traveling around, they're of course on the bordering on just on the edge of Jerusalem, but these walls that continue to be built and grow and inconvenience the lives of Palestinians incredibly are menacing, and until we're able, groups like Hannah's, the Rossing Center, and others who are committed to peace and negotiation and hearing each other's pain, until some breakthroughs happen there, these walls are not coming down, but they must. Thank you, everyone.
So I was asked to say a few words, and I thought I might comment on some of what I've just heard and then talk to you a little bit about what I think, what I do and what I think people can do to try and respond to the horrors that some of you have described. First of all, as people have said, the settlements are illegal at international law, all of them, as is the occupation, determined by the International Court of Justice. And many of the settlements were illegal at Israeli law, determined by the Supreme Court. But this government, the most radical, conservative, messianic in Israel's history, has essentially ignored that and allowed new settlements to be built. The latest, it's called E1, has the possibility of dividing the West Bank in two and making congruous West Bank almost impossible. These activities are aimed at making the two-state solution impossible. And all Western governments have said that the two-state solution, and I personally agree with it, is the only way that 7.5 million Jews and 7.5 million Arabs can live in peace together. But the West has not done enough. It's done virtually nothing. When I was ambassador, there were 250,000 settlements. There are now 750,000 settlements. 500,000 are in what are called the settlement blocks, relatively close to the Green Line, and they will be swapped for land in a deal. But 250,000 settlers, many of whom are part of what you saw, these illegal settlers from America, from South Africa, and from other places, including Israel, who are violent and messianic, that's going to be the problem. One of you quoted Bibi Netanyahu's Amalek quote. That's one of the reasons that he and his former defense minister are currently under warrants for war crimes and crimes against humanity before the International Criminal Court. And we will see how all this plays out. He is, of course, facing 3 criminal charges in Israel itself. Finally, I just wanted to say to Chris that there is some indication that the center left is coming back. The two left parties merged. Yair Golan, the head of that party, is polling well. The Arab Israelis have decided to join together. No coalition is going to be able to defeat Bibi and company unless Arab Israelis, who make up 20% of the population, join. And so things are looking somewhat better, although everyone in Israel that opposes Bibi is worried that somehow he'll pull this out again. My fear is that if Netanyahu were to win the next election and have the same kind of coalition, that Israel's soul will be lost and the West Bank will be lost. So this next election truly is one of the most important. From my perspective, there are a variety of ways to respond. I write op-eds, I do media, I speak in public, trying to give a balanced and honest analysis of the situation. I work with an organization called JSpace, which advocates before the Canadian government to do more to pressure Israel to obey international law and to stop the illegal settlements. I work, I'm on the advisory board of an organization called New Israel Fund, which raises millions of dollars to fund within the Green Line in Israel, the Arab-Israeli community, legal funds to defend Palestinians, a whole variety of projects to allow minority rights to be able to express themselves, whether they be LGBTQ, pro-Palestinian. They give money to Standing Together, which brings Arab Israelis and Jewish Israelis together. I tend to agree with Jeff. I think that the next action by the Canadian government, working with the EU and the Nordics and Australia and New Zealand, has to be trade sanctions. Nothing seems to work with this government. We have sanctions already on 2 ministers. We have sanctions on some of the settler organizations. But I think only more sanctions it won't change the policy, but it'll make clear to other Israelis that voting for Likud is the wrong way to go. Finally, I chair an organization called Rozana Canada. Rozana Canada is an affiliate of an international organization. We have Rosanas in the United States and Australia, the UK, and Germany for the EU. And we bring Israeli and Palestinian health professionals, doctors, psychiatrists, nurses. We train Israelis and Palestinian nurses together. We have a unit of Palestinian gynecologists, GPs, dentists, and social workers that go out in our van to the most remote villages in the West Bank to provide primary health care to women and children that have rarely seen a doctor. We have 2 clinics operating in Gaza right now that have seen over 6,000 patients. They're doing primary health care there. Before USAID cut $2.35 million from our budget, we were training 250 Palestinian and 250 Israeli nurses together, teaching the Israelis Arabic and teaching the Palestinians Hebrew, and giving them courses in conflict resolution and resilience. You can go to rozana.org, rozana.org, and see our other various projects trying to bring Israelis and Palestinians together in an environment of respect and dignity, and at the same time trying to build up the Palestinian health system so that it will be even more sustainable when a Palestinian state is finally granted its full status. Over 100,000 Palestinians are treated in Israeli hospitals. We transport them there. We help to treat them there as well. Finally, we are hoping, if we get Israeli approval, we have negotiated with a nonprofit that produces laser printed for amputees. The name escapes you right now, but we're going to provide these prosthetics for amputees from Gaza, children, and they'll be provided physiotherapy and mental therapy in a rehab hospital that we support in the West Bank. So I'll stop there, but one of the other questions that has come up relates to polarization. There is huge polarization in the region, and there is huge polarization here in Canada. polarization between Jews and Muslims, polarization to some extent between the Christian community and the other communities. And maybe I could just ask you what your experiences are in that regard. I mean, have you been accused of anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism because of your views? Have you reached out to rabbis, to imams, to try and sort of bring people together? I really do find that this is a key problem in our society now. And I was frankly extremely disappointed that the Jewish clergy, even in the Reform movement, did not speak out enough about what was happening in Gaza, the destruction, the death, and the starvation. And that's a problem. And I understand why Israelis who suffered are unable maybe to get past their own PTSD, but I don't understand why clergy here, Jewish clergy here in Toronto, weren't speaking out enough. So I'll stop there, and anybody that wants to jump in, please do. Nobody?
Yeah, I will. Yeah, so I work as part of an interfaith group, and it's just turned out to be something that we cannot talk about. It's been almost impossible, and yes, I have been accused of being anti-Semitic. Simply for even having gone to Palestine. Yeah, it's very, very difficult to find allies at the moment that we can speak to. And I work with the imams as well, and I think for the ones that I know well, they also feel that they're treading on very, very delicate ground, and they don't want to be accused of being anti-Semitic either.
Well, let's be in touch. I've got a rabbi at my synagogue that would love to talk to you and work with you on that.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Can I speak? Because it's not on. I have a it's open. Mr. Allen, my name is Darlene Verlo. I belong to the Academy for Lifelong Learning. And we are just up the road at Spadina and Bloor, and I'm also on the board, the committee, responsible for distinguished speakers. And your name is on the list, and not well received, because we are a very comfortable, happy group. We don't talk about uncomfortable things. So it is predominantly, the organization is heavily run by Jewish people. It's not specifically Jewish, but I want you in there. So the distinguished, the upcoming one, series is already booked, but we need people for next April, May. The only way we'll be able to get you in there is covertly. And because the objection is not to the substance, it's that this whole topic would make people uncomfortable, and we're very comfortable. And so I'm wondering if there's some way I can give you the names of people and you can have private conversations and get in there. So typically, our distinguished speakers meet at Innis College, U of T. There'll be 100, 200 people or so. People can come or not come, right? And that particular series is open to not just Academy members, but to the public. Very distinguished people. I want us to deal. So if you have some ideas, it's going to have to be private conversations. But this is a moral injury not to deal with this issue.
Board there. I spoke a couple of weeks ago at a very conservative synagogue in Ottawa. And the whole point is to disturb a little
Yeah.
bit and to have people hear alternative views about what's going on. I think most of you know I'm Jewish. My wife is the child of Holocaust survivors. I have a sister that lives in Israel on the border with Lebanon. She faced rocket fire and has many times. But it doesn't stop me or many, many other Jews that I work with in Toronto from understanding the incredible injustice that is being employed against Palestinians. Some within Israel, discrimination, yes, but especially in the West Bank, and of course, the horrors that we've all experienced in Gaza. So we can talk about coming, and I'd be honored to speak.
Fantastic.
Because of another event here today, we have a hard stop at 2:30. We do have time for a couple of questions from the audience, and I'm sure, given the stories we've heard, that you have some. So if you want to raise your hand, I will bring the microphone to you. Ron.
Thanks very much. And a quick one for Jeff. Could you please tell us the significance of your scarf? Scarf. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
This is called a keffiyeh, and the symbolism in the keffiyeh. You see these worn throughout Palestine. The traditional color is black and white. I just happened to pick up this particular color because it's I found it kind of unique. Yeah. The watermelon is a symbol of Palestinian liberation because the colors of the watermelon correspond to the Palestinian flag. And Palestinians cannot just freely fly their flag. And so the watermelon has been adopted as sort of a stand-in symbol of Palestinian liberation. This keffiyeh here has three symbols. There's the roadways. You can't really see it. There are the leaves of the olive tree, and there are the fishing nets. And these represent key elements of Palestinian life. And as I said, it's commonly worn. So I wear it as a symbol of solidarity.
Hi, I wonder if anybody can help me understand what this Board of Peace will do for Palestine and the U.S. involvement.
It will not help the people in that country in any way. Is my opinion. It's a device to generate income for certain business interests.
Just to add to that, I think this Board of Peace is a mechanism to further a settler colonial agenda, and you don't see Palestinians on the board of Peace. So that's a very telling indicator of what the Board of Peace is intentioning.
Hi, my name is Brenda Holtkamp. I'm from Brampton, actually. I hope I can be, I've got a lot of emotion. I traveled to Israel, Palestine in 2013 with Bob Holmes, Christian peacemaker teams. And I saw the horrors back then, and they've only gotten worse. One of my encounters was in Jerusalem, was with some soldiers. They were out with riot gear and their arms, and they were standing on the street corner. So I went and talked to them, and I said, I wonder why you're here with all of this armor and riot gear. And he said, well, tomorrow is Ramadan. And I said, oh, so I'm curious, is it a crime to pray? Because I understand that Ramadan is prayer and fasting. Is it a crime to pray and fast here? And immediately, he couldn't speak English. I guess I tell that story because I went to see a film here in Toronto on Friday called Earth's Greatest Enemy by Abby Martin. And she talks about war and arms and what it is doing to our planet, from human beings to other beings to the earth itself. I'm enraged by it all. I'm saddened by it all. What more can we do? We're not doing enough. I don't know what to say. I don't really have a question. I am just overwhelmed with the rage and the anger, and we must do every little thing we can.
We can take one more question, and then we'll have to do thank yous and wrap up. Anybody else? Ron.
What I really want to talk about is that when all of us in this room listened today, all of us were outraged. I'm just speaking for everyone. And we had sort of, what I want to know is how can we handle our outrage? Like, what can I do tonight when I go home to calm down? And I'm going to invite you all to answer that. Sylvia.
I think that one thing that, I mean, we struggled with this as a delegation as well, to figure out what what can we do in the face of everything we've seen, and the grief and the anger that we are carrying, you know, one of the things that I think we've realized as a group, we're getting together this week, partly so we can just be together to talk about the things we're doing, the things that we've seen. I think part of the problem is, and this goes with a lot of stuff going on in the world right now, we're all carrying these things individually. We don't have a sense that sorrow and grief and anger is linked to that, are things that are meant to be shared communally, that we are to carry these things together, and that when we share things communally, then we are able to talk about ways forward, things we can do communally that help us to fill ourselves with a vision of joy going forward. And this is one of the things, actually, one of our speakers talked about in Palestine, who said, we can't just be angry about the things that we are currently seeing. We also have to have a vision of what a joyful future looks like, that we're working towards. And we have to allow that vision of joy fill us as well as we think about what to do in the middle of the terrible things that are happening around us.
If I can. Go ahead, Nick.
I was just going to say, just do something. Pick one of the organizations, Rozana.org. Pick something that you can get behind and support, because you can't do everything, but you can do something. And that really makes a difference.
And talk to others.
I was going to add, go to Palestinian spaces locally. Go and enjoy some kanafe in a coffee shop that's owned by Palestinians. And I think, you know how when you have a hard day, you want to go home and hold a baby? I think in some ways you will receive that same joy that Sylvia was talking about. When you are in those spaces, you see families thriving. I think a lot of our anger comes from that silo of anger or that silo of rage. And holding rage right alongside witness of joy, I think can do really good for our soul.
Write your MP, write the minister, write the prime minister, tell them how you feel. Do it as a congregation, do it as a group of congregations. I can tell you that the hold that the Jewish lobby had on the previous set of governments is not where it was at all. This new government is not afraid to resist that. But as Jeff pointed out, our government and the EU and others have not gotten together to do enough yet. But make it clear to your government about how you feel and urge them to act, urge them to act with others.
I think joy and action are good notes to end on. I want to thank you, Jon, Jerlyn, Nicola, Sylvia, Jeff, and Chris, for being with us today, for sharing your stories and your insights. Morgan, thank you. For doing the impossible and pivoting 6 times to make this happen today. Thank you. David and John Deacon for picking up the food. Then we had a couple generously donate to pay for this lunch today. That was very, very helpful. If you'd like to contribute to today, there is a QR code at the back that will allow you to contribute to Rozana as a first step, or maybe a second step for you, to do something positive towards resolution, reconciliation, and peace. Thanks also to Don Lee, who brought wonderful homemade cookies. To Lisa, to AJ, and Deb, Richard, John, David, and Georgie, who are part of the Redeemer Explorers team that put this together. I hope that today is not the end. I hope today is the beginning of conversations, the beginning of action, the beginning of doing something more positive, individually as a group. We can write together as a congregation. Those of you who are with us on YouTube, you can write individually or join us to write to our government. We can talk. Sylvia has already talked to us once about boycott and divestment. We can talk more fulsomely about that and find ways to participate that way, to put pressure on the government. Anyway, as I said, I hope today is the beginning. Thank you so much for braving the weather and being here. Thank you to all of you who joined us online. God bless, and I hope everybody makes it home safely. Thank you.